All right, guys. How many of you guys are? I've already gotten a lot from like being here. I know some of you guys from the M&M, you were here all yesterday, but even just being here after graduating from the PCC or graduating this week from the PCC, getting to see everybody in person instead of a Zoom square, pretty awesome, right? Pretty awesome. Well, we are real people, and we are too. We are too. Can you believe that? No, but super excited to be here with you guys, of course, but also like super proud of you guys of going through like some of you guys last 3 months as your first like exploratory have an opportunity to understand the push method and life coaching and all this kind of stuff, and how far you've been able to come in 3 months is a game changer, right? And you can ask some of the people in the M&M that just keeps going and going and going, and you're like, how is this exponentially like going to continue on, right? So super proud of you guys for making it out here. I know it's kind of crazy to have to all come from all over the world in order to be right here, right? But it's also so powerful when we get to see each other, and you're going to form connections that some of you guys like have been like lifelong connections now. Like you meet all the time, probably more than you see me and Josh, right? Which is pretty crazy because we tend to overtalk. We tend to overtalk, right? But you've done a bunch of things. Like, let's think about this, because I want you to acknowledge and appreciate yourself for all those things you've done. Number one is you've learned some powerful tools, and you learned how to like work and not only help yourself when it comes to like what's going through your mind, but also like helping other humans like that too. When I was going through my life coach certification, it was kind of weird because like half the people, they joined not to create a business, but just because they wanted to get coaching and learn the skill of life coaching, right? So whether you're doing this to start a business, to add it to your current business, or just for yourself, it's a really powerful tool, right? And because you've gotten uncomfortable, you've gotten out there, you've coached a whole bunch of people. I've listened to all of them. My brain hurt a little bit, but it's all good. It's all good. But you guys, I'm so proud of like, if you look at the first call that you've ever did all the way to the 6th call in the practicum, it is night and day, and it just continues to blow my mind. But one of the things you'll hear over and over and over again today probably is how proud Josh is of you guys, because you guys are the first group that he like challenged to get as many consultations as you possibly could. And you guys freaking blew it up. Like I kept seeing it time and time again, and how exponential that grows, that helps you to grow and get comfortable with sharing this stuff is a game changer. So super proud of you guys for that. But you also set some really big goals, right? Even from the beginning, doing the breakdown session, learning a little bit about like what you truly want, and then reverse engineering it and doing all that great stuff, right? So you had that, not only the realization of life coaching, but also setting bigger goals. You learned the push method, obviously, right? But you also got uncomfortable as heck. Not only by like coaching just, well, some of you guys like random strangers on social media, but getting into breakout rooms and sharing some of the things that you shared, right? Which is like, you typically wouldn't share that with strangers, even though we were all strangers, probably like 3 months ago. But in reality, being able to lean in and share that is like makes you even stronger, but also gives you the ability of going, you know what, like this is a really powerful tool that I can use for other people, right? Which helps us lean into our heart rather than our head when we're first coming into contact with people, right? And so to think about that over a 3-month period of time, that is freaking crazy, right? 3-month period of time, and how much further that's going to be is going to be awesome. Now, one of the things that we like to talk about on my workshop here, and there's Josh, is different ways that now that we have the push method, like thinking about it in like multiple different ways, because there's not just one way, if you guys have seen, to like coach, or one way that works for everybody, right? And having these like plethora of different tools that we can use at our disposal, that's something that we teach a lot in the M&M, but using it, different tools, because have you guys noticed that some people you coach is like, oh man, using the push method is cool. It's like really easy. They go really quickly down it. But then you have people who are like perfectionists or overthinkers, or they're coaching yourselves in the interim while you're going, and everybody's looking at Elizabeth, but I don't know why. But as you're going, like this is just the way that it is, right? We're all a little different. We all like, some of us don't want to tell people what we're struggling with, because what are they going to think of us and whatnot. So having like multiple tools is always the best thing, right? You don't just have one tool, you have multiple different ones. So I want to share a little bit different of a tool with you guys here today, so that you can go through this experience yourself, but also see how the push method, believe it or not, works through almost every single one of these tools. Even like Josh coaching, like when he's like focusing on his intuition, he's like 14 steps ahead of the rest of us. We can still, or at least I can go back and I can pull out the push method that he uses, but he just goes and attacks it in a different way. All right. So as a person who's continuing to level up coaching, yes, I want you to lean into like the push method and that be your like save all, but also I want you to think about like, what are some different ways that I can use how I know that our brain works to really help people that maybe need a little bit more additional help than just the push method. Does that make sense? And so we're going to talk about this process today. It's called be, do, have. How many of you guys have heard of that before? I know all my M&M people have. Be, do, have, right? Now this is a process and it goes in that order. Be, do, have. So I'm going to explain each one of these. I'm going to show you how it works with the push method. We're going to go through a little bit of a workshop today to see how this has actually been something you've used in the past. You may not know it and you've actually had success with it. And then we're going to look at a situation that maybe you are kind of struggling with right now and how you can actually reverse engineer it by pulling out some of the great things that you've done in the past to move it into the future. Now, I know I was talking to the M&M yesterday a lot about sometimes we're afraid to go into the past, right? Because it's very easy to get into your head voice when you think about the past. But if I ask you a really great question that asks you about a time when you actually were excelling in the past, a time when you felt most connected to your family, a time when you were on point with your health and fitness, a time when you were motivated, a time when you had momentum, now it changes the game and it's no longer head voice. It's like, oh yes, I didn't used to be good at health and fitness, right? So for me, example, I lost 100 pounds, right? So when I think about all of the struggle I had to go through in order to lose that weight, I'm like, wow, I've been able to accomplish that. And I can pull out the pieces that worked for me, the pieces that people said were going to work that didn't work. And I can say, how can I apply this to my business? How can I apply this to my parenting? And you can do that if you ask really great questions and you can help people stay out of their head by visiting the past, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take some of this past that you had, which you guys have all excelled in different areas in the past, all right? Your head voice might not tell you, but you would not be sitting here in this room if you did not excel at something, multiple things, all right? But we also have those areas in our life where we do need a little help, where we are struggling a little bit, but for some reason our brain doesn't go, well, what has worked in this area and how can I go over here? I think that's the reason why how my brain works. Like when I can see Josh coaching and I can reverse engineer it is because I look for the universal principles and I'm like, oh, so I can take this and move it over here. And when you're in a coaching session and somebody's like, nothing is working. You ever had that? Yep. Nothing is working. And you say, okay, but tell me about a time when it was working. What were you doing? What personal development were you listening to? What book were you reading? Who were you hanging out with? What's some activities that you were doing? What are some of the stories that you were thinking back then? What other things were going on in your life? Who were you not hanging out with? And then they're telling you all this stuff and you're like, okay, let's just do that. All right. And it's not you telling them what to do, but it's you using their past to actually be able to help them moving forward. Does that make sense? So we're going to learn a little bit about how to do that today. Now, when I say be, do, have, in our words, the first one's going to be, but I want you to put believe, okay? Because it starts out with what? The belief system, right? Because belief drives behavior, right? So that first part is the believe part. The do, that's the action piece, right? So we must first believe something before we even start doing it, right? Otherwise, we can do it with and have misaligned action where it's unaligned action where we're just taking action. It's not with good energy, right? And then all the way at the end, we get to have, right? Which is the manifest part of it. Now, a lot of times we reverse these, okay? So what we think is that we have to have the time and have the money. And once we have the time and have the money, then we can do the stuff. And when we do the stuff, then we can become something. And it's bass backwards, all right? It's totally in reverse. You need to first believe, become something different in the process, right? When you become something different in the process, you just start taking those actions because that's who you are, right? I know Tina talks a lot about identity. When that is just you and you just wake up and exercise and you don't have to fight with the alarm clock because that's just what you do, you're this is just a part of who I am. I don't even have to think about it. I just do it, right? And then what happens? Then you get to have. Then you get to manifest and then you get to create, all right? Now, here's the thing. When we break this down, you're going to see how in some areas you started off with be, do, have, and you've been able to excel at it. But there might be an area right now that you're like, wait, I need to have this first. I need to have the following. I need to have the social media presence. I need to have all of this stuff. And once I have this, then I can do. Then I can hire somebody from the outside. Then I can do this next course. Then I can do this. And then I'm going to become somebody else in the process, right? Now, I want you to think about this. If you think about the activities that a $1 million business owner like Josh does, and you think of the activities that somebody who's making, I don't know, $1,000 a month, right? They're different activities, right? But what do you have to believe as somebody who can make $1,000 versus believe somebody who's going to be making $1 million, right? It's like kind of like the difference between having that CEO mindset versus the employee mindset. And if you have the employee mindset, what are the activities you're going to do? Well, you're going to be the one sending 1 million messages. You're going to be the one who's like burning yourself out. You're going to be one doing all these activities. And then you're going to have what you currently have, right? This is the whole manifestation piece. But if you start to think like, what would Josh think about this? What are some of the actions that he would take? What are some ways that he would believe about this, right? I mean, I just think about this, like when you guys were to send some messages to somebody. So early on in my business, I would send a message to somebody and they didn't get back to me, or they said, no, not interested, right? That would like take me through this little bit of a spiral. But then when I made this little tweak and I'm like, well, what would Josh say if he got this message back? What do you guys think? What would you think? Okay, right? He's like, maybe this is not my right person. Maybe it's their loss, right? Maybe I just got them at the wrong time. Maybe their like kid just threw up and their dog pooped all, and they couldn't get back, right? And that's because he believes something else entirely different, right? Do you think it stopped him? Like when he sent a message? I mean, if you heard a story, nothing stopped him, right? It's like, there's nothing that's going to stop me. And that's coming from that place of belief, right? It's like, maybe my bank account doesn't have $1 million, but I have the $1 million mindset right now. And I'm going to approach this as if this is the way it is, right? And then you start looking at things like a science experiment, and then you start finding things, this worked and this didn't work. And then you don't take it really personal, right? And so this is like that process of that be, do, have, right? Now I kind of talked about like the believe part of it is your story, and the have or the do is the action, and the have is the manifest, all right? Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to think of an area in your life, okay, that you have had a goal and you actually hit it. You had a goal and you hit it. I know some of you guys, it's health and fitness, some of it's family related, some of it's career related. You guys have like crushed your career, and for some reason now that you're in business, you feel like you're starting over from square one, but yet you rose up the ranks in whatever career you're at. You're a leader, you're a boss, you're a supervisor, and there's so much great wisdom that's there, and we're going to be able to pull it out today. So I want you to think of an area that maybe you weren't so good at before, but you like crushed it. You hit your goal. You were able to achieve what you wanted to achieve, all right? Now I want you to go through this process. I want you to think about, what was it that I had to believe in order to make that happen? What did I need to believe in order to make that happen? Remember, what are the stories that you had to tell yourself to get yourself to show up, to get yourself to make adjustments, to get yourself to not be offended by what other people were saying, right? To be unmoved by the opinions of others. What were some of the things that you had to believe in order to make that happen? Now, when you had those beliefs, and you can keep writing because I'm just going to expand on this a little bit more, and I'll give you full time to be able to do it. When you had those beliefs and those stories, what were some of the things that you were doing? So what were some of the things you were doing that were heading you towards that goal? Now, when we think about those activities that you were doing, I want you to like really check in on like, what was my energy like when I was doing those activities? What was my energy like when I was doing those activities? Was it high? Was it low? Did you have to even think about doing those things? Or did it start to become just a natural part? At what point did it become natural? I mean, was there a point where you were like having to force it, or feeling like, I've just got to convince myself or trick myself or motivate myself to do this? And then all of a sudden something happened where it just became a part of your natural like existence and you just did it automatically? I want you to think about those things, because obviously we're going to be able to pull some wisdom from that. But everybody's story is going to be a little different. Maybe it was this one moment. Maybe it was a rock bottom moment. Maybe it was when something tough happened. You're like, nope, this is never going to happen again. And maybe that was the story that fueled. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe you're painting the vision of the future and what this is going to look like and all the impact that it's going to make, right? So really think about this. I want to make a little bit of a switch now, okay? So now you have this area that you've like really excelled in, right? You've asked yourself, what did I have to believe? What were some of the actions that I was taking? And what did it create for me, all right? Now I want to switch to an area that you're working on right now. An area that you're like, okay, I'm really wanting to do well in this area, and maybe you're struggling with it. Maybe you're like, this is a difficult like situation, and I don't know how to, or what the next thing is, or what I need to do next, okay? And I want you to think about what that area is, right? Now I want you to think about, like, first off, paint a picture of what that thing is going to do for you. Like when you're able to achieve it, right? Maybe it's in business, maybe it's in parenting, maybe it's in whatever, like whatever this big goal is that you have right now. I want you to paint a picture of like what this would look like when it's all said and done. And by the way, guys, I'll just pause you for a second here. Do you know why I started off with that question? Like that question about like what actually do you really want and what kind of impact is it going to have on you? Tina knows because she's pointing to it. Because I want you guys to get into your heart voice first before I ask you the next questions. Otherwise, you're going to be in your head for the rest of this whole entire presentation, all right? So as a life coach, as a presenter, as a public speaker, like if you are really wanting to connect with people and you really want them to be able to expand their horizon and think of things differently, make sure that you get them into their heart voice first, okay? Make sure you get them into their heart voice first, because then you give them the power to dream a little bit, to think a little bit. It's like a muscle. When you start exercising that muscle, it's like it makes it so much easier for them to be able to stick in there. But if you start with this and you're going down here, it's very easy to get them trapped, and then they're going to be like, well, I just don't know what to do next. And then they're going to get stuck in there, right? So instead, we tap into our heart by asking a heart-based question before I get into the head voice stuff, okay? Now, I want you to think about this goal that you have, all right? This goal that you said is going to make an impact, all these different ways that it's going to be able to make an impact, right? So yes, I want it to be able to help you and your family, but also when we think about the exponential impact that it's going to make, it makes it feel less selfish, right? Because it's very easy if we start to convince ourselves what it's going to do for us and we forget about the impact that it's going to make in the world, it's going to get us back into our head voice, right? But when we think about it, all this stuff that it's going to impact, we're like, wow, everybody's going to be impacted by this, right? And so now we want to reverse engineer this, all right? We want to reverse engineer. So now you have your goal, right? You begin with the end in mind. Now let's start and take it through the be, do, have process, all right? Now, I want you to think about this two different ways. Number one is, look at on that previous page that you just had, right? Where you talked about what did you have to believe in order to get yourself to hit that goal, the past goal you hit. What were some of the actions that you had to do? What were you able to manifest from there, right? Because here's the thing, every single one of you has a different like heart voice that will speak to you, but you each have a different head voice that will speak to you too. Like sometimes for me, it's I'm not enough, right? So that's my thing. I got to keep giving and giving, giving. It flows through everything. The I'm unworthy doesn't really affect me, right? But it affects other people, right? So when we hear, especially with our flavor of heart voice, that is like your superpower, and you want to go, oh, this is what has worked for me in the past. And if I can believe it in this area, you can find a way to believe it in a different area too, all right? It's going to give you just as much emphasis and like energy to pull into that, all right? For me personally, it's like family. If I want to do something, if I want to get myself to take consistent action, I think about the impact it's going to make on my family, but also I think about if I don't do this, what is it going to prevent? Like, what is it going to make that's not possible anymore, right? And so when I think about that related to family, I'm like, there's nothing that's going to stop me, right? For Josh is the challenge. Give him a challenge. There's nothing that's going to prevent him from losing or getting second place. Yeah. So by the way, if you ever want to convince him to do something, give him a challenge. It works, even if he knows. He knows, but that's how his internal wiring is. He's like, oh, you just challenged me. He's like, but I got to do it, right? And it's the same with us. We've got to find our flavor of heart voice, right? So when you look at that other area where you're like, this is how I got myself to crush it. I reminded myself of what I was doing for my family and the impact that it was going to make on my kids and how I was modeling that behavior. Then we're like, okay, let's pull this over here too, because it will equally apply there too, all right? So I want you to think about like when it comes to the B part of it, what did you have to believe in that other area that you can now bring over into this new area? So what are those new beliefs that we have to start training, that we have to start having affirmations around, really focusing on, right? Now, this is a process called like a belief ladder, right? We don't talk a lot about it inside of the PCC, but it's something that we teach in the M&M. And what this means is you're right here, right? And you're like, I just don't believe in myself, right? Writing, oh my God, I'm the most amazing person in the planet is not going to actually connect with you. You're going to be like, okay, that is not helpful at all. There's some people that it will. And it's like, I could flip it around like that, right? But most people can't do that. But what if you go from I don't believe in myself to like, well, Josh and Mark believe in me. Maybe I could believe in myself. I mean, maybe I've done this in a different area. Maybe I just need to learn, right? Maybe I'm learning how to believe in myself. I'm learning how to be more confident. Can you see how it just changes the feeling? Instead of going, oh, I suck, to like, I'm the most amazing human in the world. What if it's like, I'm learning how to, or they believe in me. And if they believe in me, why shouldn't I believe in myself, right? And it's a little bit of a ladder. Not that you want to live here, but like it's just that next step up until you start going, well, Mark and Josh believe in me, so man, I'm going to believe in myself. And then you start taking action, and guess what happens? You're like, I'm starting to gain a little confidence. I got my first 2 clients, right? And then you're like, boom. And you're like, boom. And you're like, boom. And it's before you know it, you're like, I do have confidence in myself. But it's also not an overnight switch like that. So this story ladder is something that you can focus on. So maybe you're going from where your head voice is right now, and you're like, what's that next step up that you can start to believe, right? It's not just an entire flip a switch and everything's going to be perfect, but like, what's that next step up? So when you think about that belief, think about what do you need to believe in order to, the next step, start doing something, right? So when you come from this place of belief that it's possible, right? What are some of the things that you would do in furtherance of this goal, right? So what are some of the activities, some of the actions, some of the behaviors? Also, what are some of the things you're not doing? What are some of the things you're not doing?